Hey guys, welcome to episode 153 of Overdose and Chill Live. I'm Andrew. Some of our listeners may know me as AK, and I'm Technical Director for Overdose New Zealand. Today I'm joined by Edwin, independent PageSpeed consultant and CTO at RUMvision, Erwin Hofman. Erwin, really appreciate you joining us today. I know it's late for you, so thanks for staying up to talk to us. I hope you've had a coffee to keep awake.
Just the water, actually, but I'll survive.
Cool. So before we kick off, we're broadcasting live on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If anyone has any questions or anything you'd like us to address during the course of the conversation, just throw it in the comments and we're happy to jump in and answer. So Erwin, I'm really stoked to have you on the session today, and I'm looking forward to chatting PageSpeed with you later on. But first, let's chat about you a little bit. You've had a pretty interesting career, starting out building your own CMS and moving into PageSpeed optimization from there, then finally building that into a product in itself. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, yeah, it's actually already quite a good summary. I started quite a while back, 2001, and yeah, as you're mentioning already, building my own CMS actually enabled me to, use and put my PageSpeed knowledge into my CMS, and it also worked the other way around. I had to learn about PageSpeed, and that, in a nutshell, ended up in sharing it with merchants and agencies, for example.
Yeah, cool. So that you've kind of grown into that PageSpeed optimization space, and that's kind of, in doing that, you've obviously kind of built out your internal tools and then started to build that into a product in itself. Maybe I'll get you to speak to that product a little bit now. Can you tell us a little bit about RUMvision?
Obviously, yeah. It has grown in a more organic way to start with, as in during my, as I mentioned before, I started to share my knowledge with agencies and merchants, and I think it's actually 50% maybe the Netherlands, where I'm from, and 50% international.
Yep.
And during those directories and projects, I obviously also needed more inside information regarding the conditions of users, like what type of internet are they typically on, what kind of devices are they using, because knowing that enabled me to tailor my audits a bit more and my recommendations, instead of just copy pasting lighthouse recommendations, for example.
Yep.
And that's where, first as a pilot, but that's where our RUMvision tooling is coming from. Because once we started using it with our own clients, we noticed that obviously also other clients could benefit from that kind of information and direct insights into their, also Core Web Vital metrics, for example.
Yeah, cool. I've had a bit of a play with it, and it's a really cool product. It's obviously we've got quite a few different tools to use, and when we work with PageSpeed, so we've got the likes of PageSpeed, Google PageSpeed, Crux reports, web page test. Do you want to speak a little bit to how your product is different than that?
Yeah. I actually did a talk a few hours ago at a SEO meetup, and there's always a misconception maybe, but also confusion as of what is important and what matters to SEO, but also real user experience, because in the end it obviously is about real user experience. But Lighthouse might be the go-to tool, as in it gives you an overall score, and there's nothing better than having an overall score, being able to tell where you are at, and then move on from there. However, unfortunately, not unfortunately for me, but in real life, it's more nuanced. And Lighthouse then is mostly a diagnostic tool, synthetic tool as they call it, or lab data tool, and it will tell you anything about the conditions that you are using to do such a Lighthouse test. Same applies to web page tests, which also is a synthetic test. Although I should add that I typically start diagnosing by using web page tests, and if a client has RUM data, real user monitoring data based on real users, then I also like to look at that kind of data, because that's giving me even more insights once again regarding conditions, etc. So yeah, Lighthouse test, web page tests are both lab data, and RUM data is, as it's based on actual users, called field data. And I should then add that the crux that you were mentioning is basically the big Google database where Core Web Vitals data is coming from, and what you see in Google Search Console is also coming from the Crux data set. And that's all also based on real users, although a subset of users, and delayed as well. It comes with a 28-day rolling period.
Yeah. So we've got our Lighthouse tests, which are basic, and web page tests, which are basically real-time tests happening kind of right now and giving us a result right now. Whereas Crux data and real user metrics through RUM as well, the difference being that we've got data going into a big database somewhere, and we're looking at that data and getting meaningful information out of that pool of data. And I think if we can just expand on the difference here between, say, Crux and your own implementation of it, Crux is a subset of Google's data, whereas what you're doing is collecting data from real users in their browsers across browsers as well, right?
Yeah. It's maybe a bit technical, but I do think it needs a bit of nuance, as in, once again, Crux data, Google's Core Web Vitals data that they are also using for the page experience ranking signal. So it is part, although a small part, it is part of SEO, is based on a subset of Google Chrome users, which might make sense because Google Chrome is a Google product. Core Web Vitals also is part of, Google SERPs. So it's all part of the Google ecosystem. And they're basically, whenever you're visiting pages, your own website or, whatever page, your experiences are basically submitted to that one big database called Crux, Chrome User Experience Report. But it's a lot of data from all those visitors out there. So they will be aggregating all the data into a 28-day window, you could say. So it's always delayed, which might make it less convenient if you're an e-commerce that is doing multiple deploys per, 28 days time, let alone your marketing team that might also be deploying third parties, for example, and email campaigns going on. So although Crux data and then also just Core Web Vitals data already is based on real users, it's not real time, so it's quite hard to act right away when something is going south, for example. And at the same time, it's a subset of those visitors because it's mostly, not mostly, it's actually only logged in users that are logged into Google Chrome browser. So if you're in a private mode, you're not logged into your, that current window, for example. And it's then mostly typical Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager users, YouTube users that are logged into Google products. And as they are logged into Google products, they're then automatically also logged into their browser.
Yep.
So one example to make it a bit more clear, I hope, is my parents, although they do watch YouTube, etc., they are not logged into their browser with a Gmail account. So you could say that their experiences are not collected and do not become part of Core Web Vitals data.
Yeah. So it's actually not even, I always understood that it was Chrome users, but it's logged in Chrome users. You have to be logged in to basically give permission to share your data. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, I do a lot of work on page speed. That 28-day window for Crux is, that is a pain point sometimes. It's quite often you make your changes, you have to wait 28 days to actually see the results of it. And sometimes you might make a change midway through the month and you only get, half a month of improvement. So the month summary doesn't actually give a good example. It's really a month and a half before you actually get real accurate results from that. Having that immediate feedback is hugely valuable.
Yeah. Also because you can then really pinpoint if something was the result of a technical deploy, or maybe a third-party activity, some third party was added, for example. So if you only have a 28-day period to work with, multiple things might have happened already along the line. So you can't really track back what actually caused your improvement or regression.
Yeah. And one thing I learned as well after talking to you is that it's not just front end either, is it? In RUMvision, you've got a few tools in there to identify gaps in caching and whatnot as well to help us improve time to first byte.
So Crux, I always say Crux data is a great start because basically Google is giving you free data and also based on real users. So that's a good start when someone didn't start with RUM data yet. However, you are missing out on, well, mostly blind spots. I think that's the best way to describe it. Because while, for example, Core Web Vitals data might be green, and Google is basically looking at the 75th percentile, which also is a bit technical, but it basically means they chop off, they order all experiences from best to worst. Then they chop off the worst 25%, and they look at the best number within that 25% bucket. And that's basically the 75th percentile, because you do not want to optimize for the median or average user. You also want to optimize and offer a great experience for users under more difficult conditions, internet-wise, but also device memory-wise, for example. However, Crux data will then not show you any nuances or dimensions. So it's hard to see, well, it's not even possible to say if a bad time to first byte and all other metrics that might have regressed is caused by bad devices amongst your audience, or because of caching. Well, as you mentioned already, maybe email campaigns, Google ads, that could then result in people landing on pages where those query string parameters were not added to the caching strategy. So in a nutshell, you are paying for customers that might actually end up having a worse experience, which actually then is very expensive traffic, because they are less likely to convert. And because the Crux data is all data on one pile, basically, you do not really get eyes on such issues, but you do want to fix them to not leak any money.
Yeah, for sure. You shared with me a pretty interesting example the other day, around really to highlight the difference between Lighthouse data and RUM data. I found it quite a cool example, and it really highlights the difference to me. That was the one around putting the ice pack on a mobile phone. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually demoed live, but well, I'm not sure if it was demoed live or if he used the video as well. But Alex Russell, who is the co-founder the one that coined the term progressive web apps, and he also helped building it, by the way, when he was still at Google. So yeah, he was the co-founder of PWAs, and he actually showed a demo that the performance of the device was better when you would stick an ice pack to the back of the device. And the same applies in real life as well. I bet that in New Zealand, Australia, but also India, for example, it's more humid than in the Netherlands. Even when you go to Spain, in the south of Europe, where it's also warmer than in the Netherlands, unfortunately. But for us, nevertheless, as it's warmer over there, devices might tend to perform a bit worse because of, browsers also have to cope with the amount of JavaScript and rendering rendering tasks. So his demo really showed that if you would, basically stick an ice pack to the back of the device, it would perform better on lab data scores. Yeah,
it's a good example to highlight, why Lighthouse is, it's good. It's a good tool. It's got its use.
Yeah.
And you can use it to identify where there are problem areas within a site, but probably not the best tool to kind of gauge the overall performance of the site, because it's very dependent on the conditions around it. And if you've got a very slow computer, for example, even if it doesn't have an ice pack on it, a slow computer can give you a slow score, even if it's a fast website in general. And that's where Crux data and real user metrics give you that better overall picture of the performance to a bigger subset of users.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. All right. So next up, we are going to speak a little bit more in detail around page speed optimization, and also dig into some of the, I was going to say upcoming, but recent changes to Core Web Vitals itself. Before we do that, Erwin, do you want to give our listeners a quick overview of Core Web Vitals? I know we've spoken to it a little bit already, but I do need to bear in mind that we've got a mix of technical and non-technical users listeners. I think it would be good just to give a bit of a summary of what Core Web Vitals is and what we use it for.
Yeah, I actually think that Google nailed it, I guess I should say, with introducing the Core Web Vitals, and especially because each metric is, in fact, telling a different story and trying to represent a different part of UX, technical UX. And I often joke that it's still called, the public tool is still called PageSpeed Insights, but if it could have been called Technical User Experience Insights, but that's not as sexy, and everyone knows about the term PageSpeed Insights already. And the reason I'm telling this is there are 3 metrics that are part of Core Web Vitals, and only one of them is actually PageSpeed related, and that's the LCP, the largest control paint, which basically is about the biggest element above the fold, or I should say within the viewport, which is often an image, especially on product pages, or a hero image on a home page. Or it could also be blocked level text elements, like on a privacy page. There are no images, so it's then obviously it will then obviously be a piece of text that will become the LCP. And I should add that a piece of text is always faster than an image, because once the HTML for the image or the text is in the HTML, the image still has to also additionally be downloaded. So that's involving a bit more delay. So a text-based LCP will always be better, obviously, than an image-based LCP. 2 other metrics are not PageSpeed related, which are CLS layout shifts, which really is a stability metric. How stable is the page not only while it is loading, but also during the rest of the page life cycle. So I should say during the rest of the journey within that page. If I scroll to the bottom and some images or videos sliding in, it could still cause a layout shift, and the user has to reorientate where it ended up reading. That could be frustrating and could then also lead to a bounce. And the last one just got swapped, by the way, is the IMP metric. And the IMP metric was, is the successor of the first input delay. First input delay wasn't really a great metric. It was a great start, and we had a great run, but wasn't the best metric. And the IMP is a very good successor. And it's really about responsiveness. Even within the same page, if I click on the hamburger menu or add to cart, users expect it to get feedback, visual feedback, quite fast. And with visual feedback, I mean, if you click on the hamburger menu, you expect the menu to pop up. If you click on add to cart, you expect a visual feedback that the product was successfully added to your cart. And if you put a lot of, basically, to summarize, if you put a lot of JavaScript in between those tasks, the user click and the next paint and the next frame, then that could be frustrating. Users could get frustrated and could bounce, and could also lead to leaking money.
We're going to get into that in a bit more detail soon. But I guess to summarize now, we've got a new metric, INP, interaction to next paint. And that's just come into play in March this year. So INP, we've got cumulative layout shift, CLS, and largest contentful paint. Those 3 metrics alone are the only Core Web Vitals metrics we have. We have other ones that are
Web Vitals,
but not the core metrics.
Correct.
And they, they're some of the key metrics we should use when we're optimizing a website. So again, like I said, we'll get into INP a little bit later and talk about. Well, here we go. We've got a question from Jason. In your experience, Erwin, are PWAs worth the hype from a page speed and Core Web Vitals perspective, or does server-side rendering impact page speed?
Yeah, that's a great question already.
Big question.
And unfortunately, there is no one answer to, rule them all maybe. But the challenge with PWAs is, I actually want to add that, once again, Alex Russell, the one that coined the term and also helped building progressive web apps, is actually quite anti-JavaScript. If you would follow him on, I'm not sure if he's still active on Twitter, but if you would have followed him on Twitter, you would have seen a lot of tweets where he had a lot of remarks about the amount of JavaScript that we put into PWAs, or actually the web in general. So he's got a quite strong stance, I guess, about JavaScript in general. But the fact that you want to build a PWA doesn't mean that you also have to ship a ton load of JavaScript. And that is actually what is happening in real life. A lot of, not a lot of maybe, but there are, I wanted to say frameworks out there that started creating JavaScript frameworks around the PWA. And that caused PWAs to get a bad name, because you do not necessarily need a lot of JavaScript to build a PWA. And that's where a challenge comes in. Because of the way we chose to build PWAs, we also, well, not really accept, but we also then get to deal with the amount of JavaScript that comes into play as well. While with server-side rendering, we could do without less JavaScript. So to summarize, I guess, if you choose to use single page application or client-side rendering, which is often comes with a PWA, then you just have to deal with a lot of JavaScript and JavaScript challenges. While if you would go with a multi-page application, which just is a fancy word for non-SPA, then you've got other challenges than JavaScript. Although reality is that even within non-SPAs and non-PWAs, we still ship a lot of JavaScript anyway because of third parties and obviously interactivity for image galleries, etc. So yeah, challenges are in the very fundamentals, I guess. Challenges are different, but it isn't like PWAs is actually fixing performance because the way we choose to build PWAs.
Yeah, I mean, you could write a fast website in pure HTML and CSS with some images on there, or you could actually write a slow page that's got no kind of JavaScript involved in it. Like, you know, if it's loaded with images and whatnot, you've got the tools. The best, you know, you make use of those tools to make a website fast, and it's kind of understanding the best way to use those tools to make a fast website, right? It's probably a good segue into my next thing I wanted to talk to you about. We obviously at Overdose, we're very focused on e-commerce, so I wanted to speak a little bit about page speed and how the impact that it has on e-commerce. I know you're not a marketing person and might not be able to speak to specific conversion rates or that kind of thing, but I think in general studies have consistently shown that, you know, better page speed performance results in better conversion rates, and it's also a ranking factor in Google as well. So it's obviously hugely important. I guess from your experience as a page speed consultant, what are some of the things that you've found from e-commerce? Like what are the things that e-commerce merchants might need to worry about, like the main things they need to care about in terms of page speed?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's always a debate and discussion between SEO, for example, and non-SEO if page speed is actually a ranking factor. Well, it is part of page experience, once again, part of page experience ranking signal. But it is not going to move the needle when it comes to SERP ranking that much because it's just one of, I don't know, 200 ranking factors. So yeah, it's not like one ranking factor is going to result in a massive change in ranking. But we also have the conversion aspect, obviously, and that's where, well, I actually heard well, let's put it this way. It would be cool if a merchant would allow me to slow down their website or webshop deliberately, because then you get a real number for your use case. Because although even at RUMvision, we've got a free tool, by the way, a free return on investment tool. If you would go to rumvision.com/ROI, then you would end up on our return on investment tool. However, it might apply differently to B2B, B2C, and it might depend on your niche and your type of visitors and their devices, obviously. So it's just a ballpark number, maybe, what you get in our tool. But if you really want to have a number that applies to your use case, yeah, you could slow down your web shop. But I haven't met anyone that actually did this, none of my clients at least. But I did read an awesome anecdote from Holland & Barrett, which is a big e-commerce merchant in at least the UK, but maybe even more international. And they said that they actually did this. So I was quite surprised, but they actually did this, deliberately slowed down the webshop for 50% of their visitors. And it gave them, well, once again, the hard numbers right away to also convince management to start, working on and improving page speed. And yeah, you can imagine that if you are talking about such merchants that, return on investment should be big. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a massive call to do something like that on an e-commerce site. But I mean, the results that you're going to get out of it are going to be, you know, geared towards you, they're going to be, they're going to give a real clear example of, just how much of an impact that page speed has had on the site. So I'm not sure how many merchants would be that keen to do it.
No, but the best part is any wins that you get from it will be, month over month. It's not like you're working on page speed and you only get a benefit once, a conversion benefit or revenue benefit once. You get it until the end of times as well.
Yeah, for sure. I guess, again, back to the question before around e-commerce in general. Are there any kind of things specific to e-commerce sites that you kind of see as common problems, challenges that merchants need to face that have an impact on performance?
That's quite a broad question. I do notice that platforms tend to share the same challenges for maybe 50%. So it's often 50% just the common issues per platform, and the other 50% is maybe the cause of the amount of custom work on top of the platform or third parties that they chose to embed, for example. Some examples, A/B testing would typically, for example, especially client-side A/B testing in combination with a hiding snippet, would typically push back FCP and then also LCP, so the visual progress of a page. Third parties, especially third parties that would track mouse behavior of your visitors, that would typically impact IMP responsiveness and the amount of JavaScript in the browser. We already mentioned ads and campaigns that come with specific query strings in the URL, like the well-known UTM parameters, but also Google Click ID parameter. And we often see that they forgot to add those query string combinations to their caching strategy, leading to higher server response time, for example. So those are typical examples, but there are a lot of examples resulting in, page speed consultancy being a job in itself.
I think from my experience as well, just you mentioned a few of them there, but all those third-party JavaScripts and whatnot that get pulled into a site. There's e-commerce. There's all sorts of metrics that merchants might want to get out of the site, and a lot of that relies on third parties. And it's quite common to see tens of external domains pulling in JavaScript. It could be up to 50, which is quite crazy sometimes. And they all have impact. So I think it's really important just to be quite know what you need on there. Only put in what you need, and maybe if you put something on the site, use it for a while, and then stop using it. Just to make sure that we bring it out again afterwards, because all of that extra JavaScript that's kind of included into the page from third parties does have a big impact.
And again, I think A/B testing is a very good example, because I even see shops, although Google Optimize is already sunset, I still see sites running the small snippets on their site. And if you're done with A/B testing, then and you're about to pause it, also be sure to remove the snippet from the source code itself, because although you might not have any active A/B tests within your A/B testing client, if the snippet is still there, it will continue to hide the page for 1-2 seconds, for example. So if you are sure you're not doing A/B tests on product pages, but you are on listing pages, or the other way around, choose to also then not load and include and embed the inline snippet on those pages where you are not doing any tests at all. And if you're only doing tests below the fold instead of above the fold, don't even use the hiding snippet. Don't combine A/B testing with the hiding snippet. Just only load the A/B testing JavaScript itself, for example. So those are, I guess, straight to the point examples.
And delaying that JavaScript as well can be beneficial sometimes as well. So
I should add that there are some snake oil methods, as they are called, where by using a plugin, and I especially see this happening within WordPress, but also Shopify, where all JavaScript is being delayed. But that also is not a best practice. But what you're mentioning does work. For example, with chat widgets, delayed with a little bit, on-site search. You do not need to ship all the JavaScript for all visitors, while maybe only 5% of all visitors are going to actually use the search bar, for example, or a chat widget. So those are very practical examples of things that you could delay. Yeah.
So, for example, loading the chat widget JavaScript when it's been clicked on, rather than as the page loads.
Yeah.
I'll just repeat here as well. We are taking questions, so if anyone has any questions, make sure that you pop them in and we'll answer them throughout the course of this conversation. But the next thing I wanted to get into, Erwin, was just a bit of a deep dive into Interaction to Next Paint. It's obviously a new thing this year. The first input delay has been deprecated and we've now moved to INP. So I just wanted to get you to chat in a little bit more detail around that, and I guess just speaking to some of the things that merchants might need to keep in mind as well with these changes coming into play.
Yeah, am I allowed to share my screen? Because I think that's the best method to do so.
Yeah.
All right, because I've got a little demo on my own side that is, I hope, perfectly illustrating what an input delay is. And well, it's way more technical than just the input delay, because maybe I added some JavaScript to a hamburger menu that also needs to process a bit of JavaScript, and then pixels needs to be rendered, but that's all quite technical. But let's illustrate it this way. Let's, for example, assume that some Hotjar or third party is executing on my main thread because it wants to display itself. So it first needs to execute its own JavaScript, and that will actively block the main thread. And why is it called the main thread? Because, well, there is only one. Well, there are some nuances to this, but there is one main thread that is actually responsible for picking up JavaScript work, but also rendering work, drawing those pixels to the screen. And if that one main thread is blocked, even simple checkboxes like this one, it's just plain HTML, no JavaScript involved, but even this simple checkbox will not work anymore. So once again, let's assume a third party is popping up and is blocking my main thread. And the challenge is, I guess, most JavaScript cannot be seen. You do not actively see JavaScript being executed as a visitor, but it is somewhere in the background on the main thread. It is executed to start tracking mouse behavior, or to start popping up the chat widgets, for example. So I'm now going to deliberately, by the way, block my main thread and then try to click the checkbox. So click, my hands are now off my mouse, and only now is the checkbox being checked. And you could also see how the red square was blocked as well. So let's do it one more time, 5 seconds, click. My hands are off my mouse, and only about maybe now you can see that the checkbox was unchecked and that the red square started to animate again. And yeah, this is actually what is happening in real life. And a little secret, it's not really a secret, but you would need to find this yourself otherwise. I use the transform property to animate the green square, and that's why the green square continues to animate. But the red square is animated using the margin left property. So a lot of CSS work is basically what I'm demonstrating as well. A lot of rendering work is also blocked. Not only other JavaScript is blocked, but also rendering work. And if this happens on a website during my journey, I could get frustrated because the hamburger menu, it feels like it's not responding. It feels like the add to cart is not working. I get frustrated and I bounce and leave and go to a competitor, for example. So that's why Google introduced this metric. And the INP metric, unlike the FID metric, the INP metric is basically tracking such issues within the whole, the whole page life cycle. So even if something like that would happen at the bottom of the page and I try to click on the next article, and even if it would happen here, some JavaScript occupied the main thread, then that's an issue as well. It's not only about the first interaction. I could do multiple interactions on one page. Once again, hamburger menu, FAQ, maybe scroll through the rating, the reviews, and then the chat widget, and only then add to cart. And all those moments matter, of course.
And that's one of the key differences between first input delay and INP, right? Like first input delay was on page load. So it could be tested in a lighthouse test, for example, whereas INP is through that whole life cycle of the session. So it's not just about the page load anymore. It's about the responsiveness of the site throughout the entire session.
Yeah, that's a very important nuance. Although even the FID was not only even FID could not be measured very well in Lighthouse either, because you do not know if someone starts to click after scrolling or before scrolling, so above the fold or below the fold, for example. So result is that it's quite hard to track responsiveness issues in Lighthouse, because in the end, the Lighthouse is just a laboratorium test, a diagnostics test.
Yeah.
While you cannot predict when users are going to interact with your web page. I actually used this example today. My parents, let's start with my parents. They are raised in an era where, well, first of all, there wasn't even internet, but then the internet came around. But if you wanted to go online, you first had to sit through all those beeping noises, etc. Me too, by the way, back in the days. But I might already be a bit more impatient than my parents, and my little girl, my little daughter will be, well, probably even more impatient than I am. Result is everyone has a different perception of a loading experience and when the page is done loading. So everyone might start to interact in different moments in time. And that cannot be simulated in a test. And that's why, well, the closest metric in Lighthouse is the total blocking time. But in the end, IMP cannot really be tracked with lab data tools. And that's also another reason where, one other reason where RUM comes in. Real user monitoring.
Because RUM data is actually recording that entire customer session and real interactions with the website, which is then kind of the trigger for those INP scores. You mentioned that this is probably one of the most challenging problems. The most challenging metrics to fix, right? Like LCP and CLS we get quite clear metrics on where the problem with LCP, for example. Like, here's a big image that's taking a long time to load. What can we do to make it load faster? CLS is kind of the same. There might be a color swatch loading into the page, which makes the page jump down or something like that. Whereas INP is more about the overall interactivity of the site and the speed and responsiveness of it, basically. What are some of the things that we can do to help improve these scores?
That's also quite a broad question.
Well, I mean, I'll ask it a different way. If you were coming in as a page speed consultant and one of your main goals was to improve the INP score, what would you do? What would you look at first, and what areas of the site would you be investigating?
Luckily, Google themselves also didn't sit still, as in, they introduced a new metric. And I should add, I guess, that the fact that Google comes up with a new metric doesn't mean that our UX, the UX of our shop and our visitors on our shops is suddenly changing. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but the UX might have been shit all along already. But now, by introducing a new metric, we just have a visual, you could say. We finally have a number that is telling something about a bad experience. First of all, I hope that's clear. The fact that Google is coming up with a new metric doesn't mean that the UX is suddenly changing. It was like that all along already. And if I would then be about to fix it, first of all, run data, because IP cannot be tracked down in lab data. And Google actually, as I said before, didn't sit still, and they came up with two APIs, browser and native APIs, although currently Chromium only. One of them is the LOAF API, long animation frame, and that's a debugging API. You're then able to tell which I think this is very cool as a technical person. You get to tell and once again determine which exact JavaScript file was blocking the main thread. And if you combine that with the IP metric, when did someone click, then you can cross-check which exact third party was blocking the main thread during an interaction. And then you can basically name and shame or shame and blame exact third parties. It's no guessing anymore. So I would say that's my that's my way to navigate such a challenge. Because if you're able to take the guessing work out of debugging, well, then you basically already have your answer. As a matter of fact, when Google came up with this API, we started to embed it in our RUM tooling right away, and even created a dashboard around this, which we called third-party dashboard. And then you get to see all the host names, and if you click on host name, all the individual third parties, because it allows you to start discussions about the right third parties or first party. We're talking about third parties, but it could also be hydration on your own shop or JavaScript on your own shop for the image gallery. But nevertheless, it allows you to start discussions about the right things that are impacting real experience. As I said before, it is taking away the guessing work. Yeah. So that would be my first, my first solution to at least get eyes on what is happening and who to blame.
And that's good, right? Because it means that you can be much more targeted, because it has been a bit of an art rather than a science in the past, where it's been, here's a bunch of third parties and these guys, this is what's, we think this is what's, slowing down the page and whatnot.
Yeah.
But, with these new tools, it can be allow us to be a lot more targeted with what we do.
Yeah.
Which is, it's great, because, optimizing JavaScript can be hard if there's a lot of
intimidating.
JavaScript. Yeah. And it's all of this JavaScript. If we're using a platform, for example, and some of the stuff is coming out of the box, then it's not just as simple as remove JavaScript, right? Because that can remove key functionality of the website.
Yeah.
But if we kind of get the low-hanging fruit with these new APIs, then we can see where the main problems are and focus our efforts on that, which is really valuable. Cool. All right. Well, Erwin, I think, unless we've got any more questions, I think this is probably a good opportunity to close it off. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really, really great chatting with you, and really informative. And I hope our listeners have got some, good knowledge out of this as well, and maybe some ideas for directions they can go with optimizing their sites as well.
Yeah.
Been really great chatting with you, and cheers.
Yes, thanks for setting this up, and I'll see you again.
No problem. Thanks.